Hello, everyone. Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. Today, Wednesday, February the 5th, and we are starting one more live stream, 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. Let's take a look at the participants. Let's see if we have some of our friends around, and we have a triple OG. Welcome, triple OG. Good to see you over here. Let's see what triple OG wants to discuss. I intend on applying for the retirement visa. All right. Hey, Luciano, love your show. Thank you for the support, Triple OG. I will be applying for the retirement visa and will be using your services should I apply for the birth certificate and FBI apostilles before my trip in April. So you come in April, right? So regarding timeline, the Triple OG, I would recommend you to get started on the paperwork as of now. You're right, like we usually recommend, particularly for the retirement track, to start things a little bit earlier than it would be the case for the digital nomad track, just because for the retirement, the Brazilian government, they are going to have more demanding standards for the documents, right? And now I would recommend you to start with the birth certificate, not necessarily with the FBI, because the birth certificate, if you get it now, you're not going to have an issue if you use it, later this year or even next year or in a few years. There is no expiration date for the birth certificate and the apostille. As well, at least from the immigration perspective, all right? If you try to buy real estate, then believe it or not, the birth certificate also has a kind of, expiration date because of a certain belief of the registries in Brazil. But for the immigration purpose, there is no such time limitation for the birth certificate. However, on the FBI background check front, you're going to have an issue if you start now, because whenever we are filing your application on the day of the filing, the FBI background check should not be older than 90 days. Okay, so if you get your FBI background check done now, we're talking about beginning of February, you would have, March, April, and May, okay, you would have up to May to have this paperwork filed, and it could be a kind of a stretch. So I would recommend you to start the FBI work potentially next month, okay? It does help when you are in the United States, even though like we also handle such procedure in our offices in Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo, right? We have the FBI cards, so you can do the fingerprint over there. We submit to the FBI, they issue the background check, and then once it's issued, we need to send it to Washington, D.C., because it is a federal government, so the apostille must be provided by the Department of State of the United States. Okay, so there you go. But you being proactive, and that's how you should do it. And OG is also asking, can I apply for the 3-month visa from Kenya to Salvador, Bahia? I will be spending 2 months in Kenya and then 2 or 3 months in Salvador, Bahia. 3-month visa. So where are you from, Triple OG? It depends on your nationality, right? It depends on your nationality, because Brazil is going to set up the visa requirements based on nationality, okay? Now, let's assume if you are a U.S. citizen, up to April the 10th, like there is a waiver in place, meaning you don't need any visas at all. If you are a U.S. citizen, potentially on April the 10th, the Brazilian federal government is going to enforce a visa requirement, but this visa requirement can be satisfied through an e-visa that you could potentially secure from anywhere, right? So again, if you're talking about a U.S. citizen, even while traveling, you could potentially secure the e-visa. The e-visa is available to U.S. citizens. Canadians and Australians as you speak. And the Brazilian consulate, like even though you are applying online, like this is going to be distributed among the Brazilian consulates, and they are going to review the paperwork. If they decide you should show up for an in-person interview, that could be the case, but the vast majority of e-visas are going to be approved without any in-person requirements. All right, Triple G. Yokota, oh, good to see you here, Yokota. Good to see you in our live stream. GM watching from San Antonio, Texas. All right, Yokota, thank you for your support. Yokota is a supporting client, I guess, Yokota. Thank you so much for showing up. Paul Fonseca, my daughter. Hi, Paul. Good to see you over here. My daughter, 27 years old, has a Brazilian mother and needs a Brazilian passport and needs a CPF and título de eleitor to get her Brazilian passport. Does your law firm help with that? Yes, Paul. We help basically pretty much every day. Just some background information on that. Brazilians, they have a requirement to keep their civil life in Brazil up to date, meaning like if you have a name change, you need to record it in a registry. If you marry, you need to inform Brazil through a registry. And not only that, you also need to vote for the elections. You need to keep like an active tax ID. Until kind of recently, maybe a couple of years, the Brazilian consulate, they would issue Brazilian passports for every Brazilian abroad. But then, they had an insight. They said, you know what? A good way to enforce Brazilians to take care of their civil lives in Brazil, guess what? Like, we're not going to give them a passport unless they are up to date, right? That's the idea. And nowadays, exactly, right? Like, no Brazilian is going to be able to get a Brazilian passport unless they're fully current or with such things. And we do help. We do help with those procedures. We usually have, a small block of hours. We have like, a person in our firm who specializes in registries. Like, she is actually a former registry officer. Like, she was an officer for a registry, and now she works at our firm. So she knows those things inside out. And we handle that process, for many of our clients. All right, Paul. Okay, Triple G, I'm from Georgia in the West. Great, Triple G. So, yeah, so that was exactly what I told you, okay? Up to April the 10th, no need for any type of visa. You can basically just enter Brazil under a waiver. Very interesting thing, like I hammered that, so many times here in the live stream in the past, but I know you were not here. The Brazilian federal government, they tried for 3 times to implement the visa for U.S. citizens. But, the Brazilian Congress said, you know what, that's kind of nonsense. U.S. citizens, they bring like a ton of money to the country. Why should we make their lives more difficult, right? And so the Lula administration tried for 3 times in a row unsuccessfully to implement the visa requirement. And if, history teaches us anything, is that they are not gonna succeed for a 4th time, right? Like, that would be my guess. And of course, there is a chance that they are gonna be able to get it through this time, right? Like, otherwise, why would they set themselves up for a 4th time of failure, right? It doesn't make much sense. So there is that. Like, we don't know if on April the 10th there's going to be a visa enforcement or not. In my opinion, I don't think, it should be enforced. U.S. citizens, they bring so much, currency and cash to the Brazilian economy. And you know what? I think there is a need for, a practical and common sense approach to, economy, if you will. That's my take. Let's see what happens. Paul Fonseca, she was born in the United States, and I'm also American. All right, so your daughter has a Brazilian mother and needs a Brazilian passport. right? So your daughter, even though she was born in the United States, because she has a Brazilian mother, I assume she is like trying to get a Brazilian passport, right, Paul? And as her birth certificate was recorded in a Brazilian consulate before she became an adult, she's entitled to the Brazilian passport. Okay, if she has not, if her birth certificate from the U.S. was not recorded in a Brazilian consulate when she was a minor, then there is another process, a more cumbersome process for her to secure the Brazilian citizenship. But if her birth certificate was recorded in the Brazilian consulate when she was a minor, guess what? She's a Brazilian already, and she can get the Brazilian passport as soon as she takes care of, título de eleitor, which is the voting card, the CPF, which is the tax ID, and so on. Thank you for sharing, Paul. All right. Let's see what else we have over here to discuss. All right. So, talking about currency exchange, in the currency exchange, the US dollar has been dropping in value against the Brazilian real, but is still like substantially better for foreign citizens to buy real estate in Brazil than it was like 6 months ago. Right now, I'm taking a look over here. This is just a reference, right? Like, I'm going to share with you guys. Not sure if you see over here in the top of my window, US dollar 5.792 Brazilian reals. And, this was like 6.2, a couple of weeks ago. So we have some, clients who are buying real estate and they're kind of, upset or panicking because the US dollar is like reducing in value. But this 5.792, it was like 5.4 or 5.3 not long ago, right? Like just a few months ago. So there is still a huge upside, okay, to be captured for people buying real estate now. Not a big deal, all right? Here, as you can see, Brazilians and I guess the entire world, they follow, news from the U.S. on a daily basis in detail. So here, the caption is like, other countries or major countries rejecting Trump's plan and for the United Nations to remove people from Gaza. It's illegal, right? So that's the last news. And Brazil is following the news, like very closely, just as Portugal. Portugal is another country in which I do follow the news, like on a daily basis. My mother and my sister, they live in Portugal, in Lisbon. And like the same things we see here in Brazil as top news, they are top news in Portugal, right? Kind of similar cultures. So not surprising that we see the same types of news in both countries. All right. So Yokota is sharing on a real estate investment visa after the temporary residency phase. During the permanent residency phase, are we required to reside in country 3 out of 4 years, or only if we want citizenship? All right, Yokota, let me just share with our audience so they kind of have an understanding about your question, right? So Yokota is asking about the so-called real estate investment visa. 2 other names for this visa are going to be Viper or the Brazilian Golden Visa, meaning that if you buy qualifying real estate in Brazil, you potentially get the permanent residency and a track for citizenship down the road, right? But there are different stages. Brazil doesn't sell nationalities, or Brazil doesn't sell permanent residency in a sense that we say, listen, we give you an entry door, right? But you still need to walk this path until you deserve those things. Very different approach. Like when you look into Europe, right? Like even like Portugal, right? Like Portugal, if you have the 500,000 euros to invest in the so-called the golden visa, which, by the way, does not accept purchase of real estate directly anymore. In Portugal, yes, you can, just secure, the good thing from the get-go, not to Brazil. In Brazil, you buy the real estate, you're going to get first 4 years of temporary residency. Before those 4 years expire, then you're going to apply again, and then you're going to get the permanent residency, meaning that there is no time limit. You could potentially stay forever in Brazil. And if you wanna apply for the citizenship, once you are in the permanent residency stage, you need to stay in Brazil for 4 years, okay? And out of those 4 years, you need to be physically in Brazil for 3 years. So that's Yokora's question. He wants to know if it is a mandatory that he remains for 3 years or only if he wants citizenship. And the answer is, Yokora, only if you are pursuing the citizenship, okay? If you get the permanent residency, you still need to maintain some contact with the country. And in our understanding, if you follow the 14 days every couple of years, that should be enough to keep your permanent residency active, right? And then if you decide to pursue the citizenship, that could be done like down the road, all right? So that's the answer, Yokora, and glad to see you over here. Paul is sharing, when she was a child, she did have a Brazilian passport. Yes, Paul, so that means, her birth certificate was recorded at the Brazilian consulate, and therefore she was able to get a Brazilian passport. So her citizenship is settled, right? And now it's a matter for her to get those things up to date. So the consulate is going to allow her to get a new passport, all right? A tip here, Paul, like if she has a plan for visiting Brazil, usually the Brazilian authorities, they are going to allow a Brazilian citizen to enter Brazil even with a Brazilian expired passport, all right? Even with a Brazilian expired passport, as long as they can tell that the person on the passport is the person who's traveling, okay? So that means, if the passport has been expired just for a few years, most of the time this passport is going to be good for the person to travel to Brazil. However, let's just for the sake of explaining, let's say if the passport has been expired for 10 years and your daughter now is 22 and she was 12, naturally, the airline, nobody's going to be able to tell if your daughter is the same person, like in the passport, and therefore they are not going to accept the expired passport, all right? But so this approach is to try to mitigate this new approach by the consulate. The consulate says, you know what, I'm not going to give a passport to any Brazilians unless they are 100% up to date with their civil obligations in Brazil. On the other hand, just because I know how Brazilians are in general, right, leave things like for the last minute, are not really great planners and so on. If they have an emergency and need to travel to Brazil, as long as we can tell from the passport, from the expired passport, that they are the same person, we're going to let them enter Brazil. All right? Does it make sense, Paul? So just sharing in case she has a trip in her plans for the next few months. Yokora, perfect. Thank you for clarifying. Thank you, Yokora, for participating. All right, let's see what else we have over here. All right, what other topics? Maybe just sharing with a triple OG and everyone else. Retirement visa in Brazil has gone through a really nice upgrade, right? Like until a couple of years ago, to a couple of years ago, the retirement track, it was pretty much similar to the digital nomad track. But now the retirement actually gives you access to the permanent residency, right? Like, so you start with the retirement visa, which becomes a retirement residency once you are in Brazil. And then you're going to renew eventually as a permanent residency. And then again, under the permanent residency, you're going to have access to the citizenship if you like. Okay, so pretty impressive. All right, I have a Matthew here. You got this, that. Thank you, Matthew. I appreciate the support. So good to see you over here, Matthew. Matthew is my son. He's like a 20-year-old young man, and he's assisting me with photography and stuff. I'm pretty excited for his interest in photography, and thank you for your support, Matthew. I really like to see you over here. All right, let's see what else we have. All right, so we were talking about the retirement. So yeah, the retirement is becoming more interesting because now you kind of get the same thing that a $200,000 purchase in Brazil would get you, right? Without the need to spend the 200,000. So pretty big deal in my opinion. The only downside is that Brazil immigration got crazy about the requirements for the retirement track. So before, right, like until probably maybe 1 year and a half ago or 1 year ago, I don't recall. The only document that we would get an apostille for was the birth certificate, just like the digital nomad, right? But nowadays, the Brazilian immigration is going to expect an apostille for pretty much every single document, for the retirement track application. And that's crazy because, like whenever you use a service provider for the apostille, usually you're gonna pay, you're gonna pay $200 for the first document and $100 for each additional. And the catch is like most of the time you cannot handle all of them in the same place because you need to match like the state in which the document was issued. And therefore, if you are born, let's say like in New York, the apostille needs to be issued in New York. If your bank and other stuff is like from, I don't know, like Georgia, then guess what? Those documents need to be issued with an apostille in Georgia. And the FBI background check needs to be apostilled in Washington, D.C. So right there, you have a bunch of $200 fees, right? And that's how it works. Let me see if I can share. I'm gonna share an example of an apostille, just to illustrate the concept. Sometimes you just hear apostille and you may be asking like, what is it talking about, right? So let's take a look. All right, let me see. They have an example of an apostille somewhere here on their website. Apostille, right? Okay, so this is an example, right? Like we're talking about New York. This is an actual apostille from New York. This one was issued. Let me see when it was issued. I think it is 2012, right? So 13 years ago. And I'm not sure, maybe it was given to them by me, okay? And if I'm not mistaken, like I was back in 2012, I think it was in New York City. And I did go, like to the Department of State, which is located in Lower Manhattan, if I'm not mistaken, like in the financial district. So it works like this: like you get a notarization on the document, and after the notarization, you take to the county department, and you get an additional stamp. And after the county department, you actually go to the state department, and you get this final document that you see here over my screen. All right, so that was the process, and as far as I know, it remains kind of similar. So in New York, there are 3 steps. In other states like Texas, there are just 2 steps. Okay, it's notarization, and after the notarization, you get the apostille. In New York, it's like a 3-step process. Okay, but this is an apostille. It's a single sheet of paper, and it comes with the stamp of the Department of State, and that's pretty much it. And it goes attached to the underlying document, which could be like a birth certificate. It could be like other types of documents as well. All right, Luciano, when should I apply for your services? My case, triple OG, I would say SAP, right? Because something that I see happening, and it's always puzzling to me, it goes like this: like the person says, I'm going to hire your services, but I want a list so I can have everything ready. And once I have it ready, then I hire your services, right? And then my answer to that, triple OG, is that listen, you're gonna be wasting time and you're gonna be wasting money, because our fee is gonna remain the same, and you're gonna be doing a lot of you're gonna be doing a lot of learning on your own, and why you shouldn't be doing that, right? Like, you should hire us first, and then with our support, we're gonna tell you exactly how to get those documents in the most time effective and in the most cost effective way. And you're going to be using our service for longer, because now you're using our advisory on how to get to the documents, right? For many clients, we even make our office in Dallas available. So you send the documents to Dallas. In Dallas, once we have a number of documents, we're going to ship to Brazil. And so, like, if you wait until you are, midway through the document collection, you're not going to be making the most out of our service, triple OG. So if you are settled, right, that would be the question for you to ask yourself. Are you sure about your plan? If you are sure, just hire our service. So whatever you're going to do in the scope of your application, you're going to be supported by our team. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Okay, let's see what else we have over here. I'm going to ask you guys, for those of you who are online with us, like, if you could like our live stream, that helps with our business, of course, and it does help other people find this content later on. So I appreciate the support. If you could just go and click on like. All right, and maybe we're gonna have here a question just for fun. If you could pick one thing in Brazil that is really important to you, right, in your journey. So something that is really important to you in your journey in Brazil, what it is. Let me know in your own words. Of course, there is no, right or wrong. It's more a matter of opinion. I would like to ask you, like, what do you like in Brazil? What attracts you to Brazil? Let me know in the comment section. And it is nice to have your perspective on Brazil. All right, so answering here a question from our backlog, like, things are going crazy in the United States. Like, should I worry that Brazil is going to retaliate if Trump gets, like, tariffs on Brazil and maybe forbid U.S. citizens to enter Brazil, or maybe, not offer the same visas offered to other nations? All right, that's an interesting question, and the answer is, I don't think that could ever happen. Like, traditionally, Brazil is not gonna uh, make distinctions in terms of like the visa offerings to this degree of extension. All right, so there are some distinctions. Brazil may charge different fees depending on different nationalities. Brazil may allow or not allow for an extension depending on your nationality. But I think it would be very extreme for the Lula government, right? Like to prohibit like U.S. citizens from entering or staying in the country or securing those really nice, visas. And if you think it is true, right? Like the answer is probably like follow the money, right? And so naturally, if Brazil starts to make the entry of U.S. citizens difficult, guess what? I mean, it's gonna be President Lula is shooting himself on the foot, because guess what? Less Americans is gonna mean less money entering the country, and like the U.S. economy is extremely important to the Brazilian economy, just like for probably every other country on earth. So if the Brazilian government makes it difficult for U.S. citizens, to enter, to stay, to enjoy Brazil, to buy properties, like the Brazilian government is not really hurting the United States or President Trump. The Brazilian government is going to be hurting itself, if you will, right? So from that perspective, follow the money. I think there is zero chance that no matter how hard President Trump goes on, deportation, on tariffs, I mean, chances of, a substantial change of the Brazilian immigration framework when it comes to U.S. citizens, I think it's highly improbable. All right, that's my take. Of course, we never know, right? Like if there is a war, if there is, something really serious, I mean, that could be the case, but I don't see that happening. All right. All right, so Yokota, I would like to live closer to an authentic capoeira studio. So interesting, Yokota. And capoeira, for those of you who don't know, it's a kind of a mix. Is like we call it like a martial art, but I think it's almost like a dance, because usually people don't practice that, like to fight. It is more almost like something to keep yourself in shape, something to keep yourself connected to other people, and it's something really really different from whatever you think of in terms of martial arts. Like if you think about kung fu, karate, like taekwondo, and judo, like this type of stuff, and capoeira is completely different, right? Like the concept, the vibe, like everything is different. It's very Brazilian capoeira. Also interesting that originally it came from Africa, but like it became something very Brazilian because of the changes implemented to the music, to the style, to the movements. But here you can see a capoeira scene, okay? And they're even mentioning here the dance that freed the slaves, right? Like, I mean, so there are many stories surrounding capoeira, but that's something very Brazilian. You see that a lot, like in the northeast of Brazil, particularly in Bahia. I would say that Bahia is the land of capoeira. But like even in São Paulo, like when I was in my teenager years, like I would attend, capoeira capoeira lessons, and I would have a blast because again, it's very focused on integration, on community. So you make friends, there's a lot of bonding, and such an interesting sharing. Yokora, thank you for sharing. All right, so we have a dragon. You are handling my CPF and my verification letter. Aside from the birth certificate and criminal background check, what else do I need to acquire prior to my entrance in Brazil? CPF and my verification letter. Verification letter. All right, Dragon. First thing, thank you for being our client. And I believe verification letter is like verification on employment for the purpose of a digital nomad application. And you're asking, aside from the birth certificate and criminal background check, what else do I need to acquire prior to my entrance to Brazil? Dragon, I think, birth certificate is the main piece. Okay, like background check, most of our clients, for the purpose of the digital nomad, they actually handle that from Brazil, right? So in some states like New York, you can get this thing done like remotely. There is the New York court system, right? Like, just sharing over here to bring some callers to our live stream, right? Like, this is just an example. So if you do like New York court system, criminal records, right? Like, you're gonna be able to get that done basically for $95, and they're gonna do that online, so you don't need to go anywhere, okay? But the birth certificate is usually something that I say, listen, if you can handle that ahead of time, I think it is worth the trouble. But Dragon, let me put it this way: most of our clients, probably 80%, they are gonna get in touch with us after arriving in Brazil and finding out they want to remain in Brazil. So they are not planners like you, right? They are just like in Brazil. They say, well, I'm here and now I'm loving this country. I don't want to leave. Can you help me continue in Brazil? And that's when we're gonna, start working on their requirements. Of course, it's not an ideal situation, but that's what we observe. And so if you're handling birth certificate and criminal background check, you are ahead of the gamer, Dragon. All right, Yokura, I'm looking forward to learning and practicing capoeira in Brazil. For sure, Yokura. You're going to have a blast. Dragon, thank you for this perspective on Brazilian government situation with Trump and his actions. That was also a fear of mine. I would hate to do everything and then it be all or nothing right before I get a Dragon. I think you shouldn't be concerned, all right? You are on track. You're going to be just fine. Dragon is complimenting. Yes, the employment verification. Well, the thing is, I'm from the US, but I've been living in Europe for 12 years. My residence is in Italy. I need to get a background check in Italy. Got it. Yeah, Dragon. But again, if you have like for the background check for the digital nomad, traditionally, right, like 98% of the time, they do not ask you for an apostille. That's for the digital nomad, all right? For the retirement, yes, they want an apostille on the background check, but for the digital nomad, traditionally they are not gonna ask. Okay, so even if this thing is being issued like in parallel, if you're asking, the Italy government to issue this thing, chances are you're gonna be just fine. But I understand you wanna be on the safe side. And yes, if you can bring with you, like less things to worry about, I completely get. I know you told me to relax. Yeah, Dragon. I'm just making sure I did not need to prepare anything more in advance aside from the birth and criminal background check. Yes, you're good. Like, there are other things for the, digital nomads, such as, the bank statement. There are, a few forms that we provide you with the forms for you to complete. But yes, you're covered, all right? My apostille birth certificate was just shipped from the US to me in Italy. And it should reach me in 3 weeks. All right, excellent. All right. Now, interesting to note, Dragon, just because we're talking about, the process of using our service, when we file your application with the Brazilian government, we use the government system. Like, there is an immigration system, which, by the way, it is not designed for end users. It's designed for immigration professionals, in my opinion, right? Like, even like when we have a new analyst at the firm, like they are not gonna be able to understand the system immediately. They're gonna need to be trained. They're gonna need to be paired with a more senior analyst. So that's what we're gonna use to file your application. So when we file your application, Dragon, we're not presenting any physical papers. We have everything, digital. We have like the board. I think we did show this board to you, if I'm not mistaken. But everything is digitally, right? Digitally delivered to the Brazilian government. We get you to the approval. After there is the approval, then we're gonna schedule an appointment for you with the Brazilian Federal Police, and then during that appointment, that's when they are gonna want to see the physical documents, right? So it's kind of weird because they approve first, and then they wanna inspect the physical documents after the approval. It's kind of weird, but it is what it is. But the idea here is that they give you like an approval, but when you show up to do the biometrics, that's when they are going to actually, inspect the paperwork. And the documents that they are going to be paying more attention to are going to be two documents. They're going to be paying attention to your passport, naturally. And the second one is going to be your birth certificate, all right? So these are the documents that they are really attached to. And the reason for that is because from the Brazilian perspective, like we don't know who you are unless we know your parents' names. So your passport does not have your parents' names, and therefore the birth certificate needs to be like an authentic one. It cannot be a photocopy, it cannot be a scanned version. It gotta be an original one with an apostille, right? Because again, it's just like a second part of your passport, if you will. And then I'm gonna show you what you're gonna receive at the end of this journey, which is the RNM card, right? The RNM card. So during the appointment that I told you, if everything goes well, you're gonna get this number on the spot. If you see this number in red over here, that's the resident number that you're gonna get. So the number is given to you on the spot, and you're gonna get a printout, right? Which is basically the same information you see in this card, but in a printed paper, right? A printed piece of paper. And then a few months down the road, the actual physical card is gonna become available, and then you're gonna receive an email to go and pick up the card. All right, I hope that was helpful. All right, just inviting those of you who haven't liked our live stream. If you could do so, I would appreciate. That helps with our business and it helps other people find our content. Please do so now if possible. Yokora, Luciano, how long does it generally take to get the Viper residency? Investment real estate, temporary visa from the moment the real estate is purchased. Let's say it depends on what you mean by purchasing. There are two main stages in the purchasing process, right? Like there is one which is signing the purchase agreement. Usually the closing is going to be 3 months down the road, right? So sign purchase agreement, and then you have the actual closing 3 months down the road. After the closing, it's going to take an additional month in average for the new title to be issued. And we're gonna use your new title as the starting point for your Viper application. Okay, because if we don't have the title, we don't have all the documents. So in the meantime, we could work on other stuff, and then as soon as the title is available, then we pack everything. And just like I was sharing with Dragon, we're gonna use the Brazilian immigration system to file your application. Something interesting to share, Yokota. Until a couple of years ago, we were needed to make you go back to a consulate in your country of residence for an interview. And nowadays, we are able to handle the entire application process in Brazil, meaning that, for some of our clients, they are already in Brazil. They don't want to go back, just for an interview. And we can handle the entire process in Brazil without the need for these people to go back to their country of origin. All right, but going back to the timeline, so you get the title, we apply. Usually in a couple of months, the application is going to be reviewed, ideally approved, right, like on the first shot. And then we're going to schedule your appointment with the Brazilian Federal Police for a month down the road. All right, so let's see the total timeline, right? A month for the title. After the closing, right? So you attended the closing for the property, 1 month for the title, 2 more months for the application to be reviewed, an additional month for you to attend the interview. So approximately after the closing, something around 4 months. In 4 months, you're gonna be attending the interview that I was talking about over here. On this interview, you're gonna get the resident number, and then an additional couple of months for you to get the actual card. All right, that is the timeline. Interesting question, Yokora. All right, we have Gisele Papazian. All right, Gisele, good to see you over here. Gisele says, thanks for taking my question. I'm looking to wire money from the US to Brazil to purchase a home in Brazil. I watch your video on wiring money to Brazil. Can you give me a few good exchange banks? I can give you all of them, Gisele. I can give you all of them, all right? So I'm going to do a search over here, all right? Bancos autorizados pelo Banco Central para câmbio. And then I'm going to translate. That means the banks that are authorized by the Brazilian Central Bank to operate in currency exchange, okay? So this is the link. I'm going to copy the link. And then I'm going to copy in our chat window right here. Do not advise on handling this by yourself, right? That's a disclaimer, right? And I think it's just natural, right? As attorneys to have disclaimers. We don't want people doing, things without knowing what they're doing and hurting themselves or losing their money and then blaming on us. So this is the heads up. But going back to the list of banks, here in this list, you're going to see 172 institutions or, entities, financial entities. And then let me see if I can right click. Yeah, I can right click. But the ones we're going to work with, Gisele, are going to be the Bancos de Câmbio. You see here, Bancos de Câmbio. We don't work with anything else, and I'm going to explain why. Okay? If you work, corretoras de câmbio, right? Corretoras de câmbio, they are usually like tiny companies, and if they go out of business with your money, you know what I mean? If they go out of business and your money is in a transaction, they, you lose your money. Now, Bancos de Câmbio, it means a real bank, supervised by the Brazilian central bank with, huge reserves. Okay, so in our 20 years of operation in this environment, we never saw any of the currency exchange banks with which we were working to have any trouble at all, what you say about going out of business. So that's why I'm telling you, out of these 172, we're going to be working with the Bancos de Câmbio, okay? And then the work we usually do, and we charge, in my opinion, we charge, not much. Like we usually charge $1,250 to handle the transaction. We kind of, handle the entire registration of your transaction with the bank, right? Because you don't know which documents they want. If you provide a document that they don't like, they refuse to work with you, right? And they don't like to work with end users just because they will need to teach you, everything from the scratch, right? So usually these banks, Gisele, they are going to prefer to work with law firms like us who have been in this space for 20 years. And we have, decades-long partnership with the banks exactly to assist you with the currency exchange. Of course, like it's not a currency exchange, like for a trip to Brazil. It's usually a currency exchange to buy property in Brazil because then, in addition to getting your money in a safe manner to Brazil, you are also concerned usually with two other things, right? One thing is going to be the currency exchange rate, naturally, right? You want to get as many reals per dollar as you can. And the second thing is like when you work with us, we are able, and these end users are not, end users or end customers are not able to do that. When you work with us, we have an agreement with the bank that we have a saying on when the money is going to be released to the seller of the property. Okay, so we kind of, emulate an escrow, if you will. It's not a real escrow because at the end of the day, we're still releasing the money right before the seller is going to sign the deed of sale. But that's as close as we can get to an escrow. All right, so that's a huge value in my opinion. It highly exceeds the $1,250 that we charge, and like we have probably, I'm gonna guess, like maybe between 50 and 100 interactions with the client and the bank and sometimes the realtor for the seller of the property, right? So I think it's a great deal to use our service. But this said, just like we always like to do, now you have the list, you have the names of the banks, and you know exactly the type of banks we choose to work with and why, right? And why. So out of these 172, we are working with approximately 5 banks only, right? These are the 5 banks that we pick based on the currency exchange that changes over time, right? That changes over time. And Dragon is absolutely right. Attorneys and disclaimers go hand in hand. That's absolutely true, Dragon. But there you go. That's a really good question, Gisele. Thanks for asking. And please have a follow-ups, right? We need more participation here. I wish you, success in your purchase in Brazil, right? Like I was saying, currency exchanges is still pretty favorable, Gisele. Like particularly, like something I like to share with my clients from, like who are currently pursuing a purchase in Brazil. Like sometimes they say, well, but like it looks like the US dollar is not as good as it was like a couple of weeks ago. And I say, listen, I remember as it was today, I had the clients, like extremely happy to be getting 5 reais for a dollar, right? So today is 5.8. And I remember people, bugging us, listen, I want to buy fast because now I can get 5 reais for a dollar. So today is even better than 5 reais for a dollar because you're getting 5 reais and 80 cents for a dollar. So it's still pretty good opportunity for sure, Gisele, to pursue a property in Brazil. Bill, oh Bill, so good to see you over here. I was getting worried about you, Bill. Oi, Luciano, any change you'll be heading to Carnival this month or you will stay away from the crowd? Yes, Bill. So I'm going to tell you a secret. Like I went to too many carnivals, I'm going to tell you, right? And I used to go, my choice of carnival. And first thing, really glad to see you over here, Bill. You are part of our history here at the channel. But going back to the topic, right? Like, so, in my 20s, like my choice of place would be the northeast of Brazil, more specifically Bahia, right? I used to love Bahia for the carnival. It was, in addition to the carnival event itself, Bahia is just like an amazing, the landscapes, and there are people from all over the country or actually all over the world. So it was such a blast, I really miss those years, Bill, but I would say I have such a great memories of Carnival. But nowadays, I guess I would rather, just to watch. I don't have anything against Carnival. So, usually that's the transition when you are younger, you are, participating, you are like in the action. And when you grow older, there is another approach, which is like to cheer for the, samba schools, right? So during Carnival, there are the so-called escolas de samba. All right, let me illustrate that for you guys. Escolas de samba, right? And samba school, like in English, and we have like different samba schools, which would be roughly like a team, and they are gonna compete in a parade. They are gonna try, like to beat the other schools in terms of, like the decoration, the dances. Something that's gonna be very important is gonna be the main song that they are gonna create, that they are gonna write for the carnival, right? And then when you kind of watch those things. Like usually we have a school of choice. My school of choice is Vai Vai in São Paulo. Vai Vai, right? This is my school of choice, Escola de Samba Vai Vai, right? So that's close to where I was born, and they are pretty successful in Brazil, and like they're like from São Paulo, right? Like traditionally, Carnaval from São Paulo, it doesn't come close, right? This is like a couple of blocks from where I was born, like that place, and traditionally. Like the samba schools from São Paulo, they are not, as comparable to Rio de Janeiro. So in the past, it would be almost like a joke, right? Like, I mean, it would be like small, groups of people, I don't know, 20, 30, 40. But nowadays, particularly because of, like the economic power of São Paulo, and not only that, but the size of the São Paulo population, I would say it's better balanced, right? I think the samba schools in Rio de Janeiro are still ahead of the game, but the gap has reduced dramatically, right? Like, I mean, again, 30 years ago, there was basically no meaningful escolas de samba in São Paulo, and nowadays they are kind of more comparable, right? Like, I mean, difficult to beat the samba schools in Rio de Janeiro, but they are comparable, I would say, right? So it's very interesting because if you are like in Sao Paulo, naturally, right, like the TV is gonna be, like sharing all the, presentations from those samba schools, like the scores. There is a score, again for the music, for the dance, like for the, we have the so-called cars, which is like a mechanical structure with people on top of it. So they give a specific score for the car. There are different scores, right? And then we're going to be watching like the Sao Paulo Samba schools for 80% of the time, and the Rio de Janeiro schools for 20% of the time. And Rio de Janeiro, not surprisingly, is going to be, probably, I don't know, 95% of the time, the Rio de Janeiro Samba schools, and maybe 5% of the time, São Paulo Samba schools, if that much, right? Like, I mean, again, like once you have Rio de Janeiro Samba schools, like there is no need for anything else. But there is that, like, so São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro in the southeast of the country, and then we have the northeast, right? For instance, I was talking about Bahia. So you can see a pretty massive, right? Pretty massive event, like in Bahia as well. People do have a blast. All right. Okay. So Dragon is reserving an Airbnb for 2 months, enough to handle everything with the digital nomad residence and start the process of renting my own apartment. Should I do 3 instead? Not trying to waste money. Dragon, I would renew on a monthly basis, okay? Like, I mean, we are unable to have this such a fine control, if it's going to be 2 or 3 months So my recommendation for you is do on a monthly basis. Okay, like I mean, you can get amazing deals over Airbnb. I also recommend booking.com. Okay, booking.com, like they usually have better choices than um, they have a better choices than their Airbnb. Okay, so that's something you could consider, right? So, and they have, like so many. You see here, Salvador, 1327, right? Let's take a look at Airbnb, Salvador, Bahia. Let me see the dates. 1721, 1721. Two guests just to be comparable. Yeah, they're saying over 1,000 places. I don't know. Okay, I don't know. It doesn't feel like they have over 1,000 places, to be honest with you. But just comparing right here, there are indeed 1327 properties, and on Airbnb, there are usually traditionally much less. All right, but my recommendation, Dragon, you're gonna book on a month by month basis. All right. Bill is saying, so good to see you. Had computer problems, was not able to get online. Absolutely fine, Bill. Just show up whenever you are available. I know you also have a packed schedule. You have many activities. So we're just lucky to have you here every now and then. And I want to say thank you to everyone who's attending our live stream. If you haven't liked it so far, our live stream, don't forget to do it. We're gonna have a new live stream on Sunday. All right, like last Sunday we were not here, but we're gonna be live on this Sunday. It's the 9th, right? It's the 9th. Yes. So talking about Rio de Janeiro time. So on Wednesdays we meet at 12:30. On Sundays we meet at 3:30. All right. We have this live stream is already scheduled on YouTube. So if you just come to the event and you click on notify me, you make sure you're gonna get a note. You're gonna get an email, a notice about the live stream being started, and then you're not gonna miss. So thank you everyone, and I wish you a blessed rest of your Wednesday. You guys